30 years since German reunification, the differences in the daily lives of those living in the east and the west of the country remain stark. From economic prosperity to political persuasion, Germans still appear divided. And as Tierney Bonini reports, while the Berlin Wall may have fallen long ago, its legacy still remains.
As the Berlin Wall crumbled, so too was the USSR's hold over Eastern Europe. With each brick being destroyed, democracy here was being born again. For 28 years, the wall ran through the city of Berlin, symbolizing the divide between East and West.
Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
On one side, there was East Germany with communism and the Soviet Union. On the other side, there was West Germany with capitalism and a booming economy. Built by the German Democratic Republic, or GDR, in 1961, the wall was meant to protect the Eastern Bloc from Western ideology. At 12 feet high, this concrete barrier, reinforced with barbed wire, spikes, metal gratings, and attack dogs, was a stark reminder of two different worlds and ideologies. Hundreds were killed trying to cross from east to west. When the wall came down in 1989, East Germans could finally enjoy freedom of speech, of movement, of being able to see their families. But unity here came at a cost. West Germany has spent trillions of dollars in rebuilding the East. Progress has been made. Since reunification in 1990, salaries are up, unemployment has fallen, and the economy is growing. But it can't compare to prosperity of the West. What was West Germany still holds the most powerful positions in government and business today. Out of 30 companies listed on the German stock exchange, none are based in East Germany. Today, people in the East still earn less than in the West, and the population is declining in the East but growing in the West, where on average people live longer lives. It's no surprise the majority of people in the East feel reunification hasn't been successful.
The problem is that in this country and in this parliament, it's always the West Germans who decide how the East Germans should deal with their past.
Even Chancellor Angela Merkel, who grew up in East Germany, called unity a long road.
Die deutsche Einheit ist nicht beendet, sondern sie fordert uns auch 28 Jahre später immer wieder heraus.
Many Germans say that what happened after the fall of the Berlin Wall set the stage to what we're seeing now. A growing support in East Germany for non-traditional parties like the Alternative for Germany, or AfD. The AfD's message? Take care of the forgotten men of the East. They also want to ban the burqa, the Muslim call to prayer, and end migration.
Wir werden sie jagen. Wir werden Frau Merkel oder wen auch immer jagen. Und wir werden uns unser Land und unser Volk zurückholen.
Support for the AfD rose sharply after the migration crisis of 2015, when Germany opened its doors to over 1 million asylum seekers. Germany may have been reunited 30 years ago, but in a country where politics are still so polarized and people's wages are calculated based on their postcodes, is German reunification still unfinished business? Tierney Bonini, The Newsmakers.
Well, to get more on this, we are joined now by Thomas Saalfeld. He's a professor of political science at the University of Bamberg. Professor Saalfeld, clearly and without any doubt, the reunification was and still is a jubilant occasion for 82 million Germans. But was it also and is it also a success story?
I think on the whole, it probably is. Given the stark differences between the two parts of the country, East and West, that you showed in your trailer, the transfer of the legal and constitutional, or the transfer of an economic system and an educational system and a political system, that's a massive undertaking. Of course, there are frictions, and you've pointed out, or the trailer or the video pointed out some of those problems. But on the whole, I would think this has been a major success.
By and large, a success story. Thomas,
Yeah.
interestingly enough, some of the polls that we see now come out on the eve of the 30th anniversary, it shows that many people in the East still feel as second-class citizens and define themselves primarily as East Germans rather than Germans. That's a really interesting phenomenon.
Yes, indeed it is. I think we can see why this is the case. You only have to look systematically at the at the German United Germany's or Unified Germany's media discourse. In that media discourse, which is of course very important, the East Germany is depicted as a failure. The biographies, lives of East Germans who struggled and succeeded and had their careers in East Germany are seen as...
Germany has been run for 16 years by an Eastern German.
Yes.
So
yes, that's right.
So I'm not sure how much of a failure the Eastern Germans are depicted in the media.
No, I mean, Mrs. Merkel is not depicted as an East German. And Mrs. Merkel, of course, but the history of East Germany is told as a failure. And yes, individual politicians have made it, are very successful, are very visible. But on the whole, the media system tells the history as a failure, biographies as a failure, and has a very Western outlook on politics, on key issues in politics, such as you mentioned, migration and refugees, such as the environment and climate change. Here you have, if you like, a West German consensus in the media that meets with some skepticism in Eastern Germany.
Interestingly enough, if we look at the stats and figures, of course, some can understand some of the concerns on the part of Eastern Germans. Yes. Salaries are certainly lower, unemployment is high, and many people, younger people in the Eastern Germany, are migrating to the western part of the country.
Yes, yes, that is absolutely right. Of course, there are winners and losers in East Germany. And there are, of course, regions within East Germany that have been relatively successul. The southern part of East Germany is more successful than the northern part. But funnily enough, ironically, it is exactly in the southern parts of Eastern Germany, the slightly more affluent, more dynamic parts, slightly with more productive economies, where the support for the AfD has been particularly strong.
Indeed, and you mentioned the AfD, of course. Perhaps more disturbingly, or most disturbingly after 30 years, is the voting patterns. Certainly we see that people in the East tend to vote much more for far-rightist parties and share their sentiments as well. What's the reason behind that?
There are a number of reasons, but I think the main reason is we have a theory in political science relating to party identification. You build up an allegiance to a party over a long period of time. Where East Germans are believed not to have had a chance to build up that longer-term emotional attachment to what is largely Western political parties, with the exception of the party Die Linke, the left party. So the attachments are not as strong, although they're also declining sharply in the West. The voting behavior is more fluid as a result of that. Parties that articulate regional interests and regional perspectives are particularly successful. In the beginning, in the first 10 to 15 years, that sort of Eastern sentiment was articulated very successfully by what is now the Left Party. And now this role as the sort of Eastern German voice has been taken over more and more by the AfD, of course.
Thomas, 30 years ago, the wall came down, but it seems that the mental wall, if you will, still exists. Yes. in many shapes and forms. What would be your recommendation or your hope be for the next 30 years? How do we get away from the walls in our heads? 60 seconds left.
60 seconds left. Well, obviously, I think demographic change will change that. I mean, we're talking about there are now several generations of people that have not experienced pre-unification Germany. So I think it is simply a matter of time for Germany to become a less divided, less polarized country, at least less polarized in East and West terms.
So it takes another generation then for
Yes,
German
I think so.
reunification, not just to do geographically, but also emotionally. Thomas Saalfeld, thank you so much for joining us, and it was great to get your take on German reunification 30 years on. Thank you out there for watching.